Previously, we spent quite a bit of time talking about Florida's major markets, the three in South Florida, plus Orlando and Tampa Bay. But the Sunshine State also has a bunch of secondary markets, and today we're going to talk about 13 of those. Welcome to Apartment Market Dynamics from MPF Research. I'm Jay Parsons, and with me to help wrestle this alligator, Greg Willett. And Greg, I'd guess that most people are probably going to expect the numbers in these secondary markets to look pretty bad. Florida is obviously synonymous with the for-sale housing bust, and it's been a very slow recovery given the fact that Florida is a judicial foreclosure state. And so most of the economies in Florida remain pretty weak. And as a result, we'd probably expect to see that these apartment markets aren't going to be very strong, right?
And by and large, the results are not great, but there is some variation there, with a few spots standing out as making some pretty strong progress there. So let's start out talking about occupancy. Again, we got 13 markets to cover here. I'm going to break them down into three different groups for you, and we'll start with the weakest ones here. There are 8 metros with occupancy of roughly 91 to 93%. Working our way from the worst to the not quite the worst list. They are Jacksonville, Tallahassee, the Treasure Coast area of Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce, Vero Beach, Gainesville, Daytona Beach, Lakeland, Winter Haven, and another metro with a really long name, Palm Bay, Titusville, Melbourne.
It's a long list. I'd love to do a geography bee and see how many of those you could put on a map.
Yeah, I would need a map to do it, and there's certainly the possibility they actually mispronounced a couple of those. Let's go to the next list. These are the ones that have really okay occupancy around the 94, 95% mark. They are Fort Myers, Naples, Panama City, Lynn Haven, and Ocala. And within that group, let me break down Fort Myers, Naples a little bit further because you've got a lot of variation there. The stock is just 92.6% occupied in the Fort Myers Cape Coral combo. But you go over to Naples, and that one's actually in pretty good shape with occupancy at 95.4%.
So by my count, at least 2 more that must be in pretty good shape for occupancy.
2 more that, in fact, are pretty much completely full, maybe a surprise for anybody looking at Florida. Those are Fort Walton Beach, Crestview, Destin, which is 96.2% full. And then best of the bunch is Sarasota, Bradenton, which has occupancy of 96.4%. And Jay, let me throw it back to you to talk about the rent change numbers. For these ones that actually have higher occupancy, is it there just because we're pretty much giving away the product?
It really isn't. And in fact, in the kind of relationship you'd want to see, the areas with the high occupancy rates are also those showing the most rent growth. Looking at the 2 tightest markets overall, Sarasota, Bradenton posted strong effective rent growth of 5.8% during the past year, and was about the same at 5.7% in Fort Walton Beach. Another spot with good year-over-year growth was Fort Myers, Naples, which was also high on your occupancy list. 5.3% rent growth there, and that was helped by the fact that occupancy has recovered for that product that you mentioned in Naples, that higher end portion of the greater Fort Myers, Naples area of Southwest Florida. And moving on down the list, rent growth doesn't line up with occupancy especially well in some of these other markets. The middle ground performers for rent growth are Lakeland, Winter Haven, Palm Bay, Melbourne, Titusville, and Gainesville, all 3 to 4% annual increases, and weak rent growth of roughly 2% or less in Ocala, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, the Treasure Coast, Pensacola, and Panama City. And at the very bottom, Daytona Beach saw minor rent loss during the past year. So Greg, while logically you'd expect to see stronger rent growth in areas with better occupancy rates, it's certainly unusual to see this clear of a pattern across 13 markets. And there's a clear reason why those 3 in particular have stood out. I know you've done a little bit of research to find out why.
Well, you know I'm always going to go to the job change numbers to look and see what's happening. And what we see in these markets is, in fact, and I won't use the word recovery because that's too strong a word for any of these markets, given that current employment is still well below pre-recession highs across all of them. But the ones making progress on the job count are the ones that are doing the best on the apartment front. Let's start with the Fort Walton Beach area. Number 1 by a pretty big margin. When you look at the job change numbers, 3,500 jobs created over the past year. Not a huge number, but it is 4.6% growth for a metro that's this small. You have some good numbers on the job side in Fort Myers, Naples, 1.5% growth overall. Again, let's go back to that split between Fort Myers, and Naples. And Naples is growing about 3 times as fast as Fort Myers. And then finally, you have Sarasota, Bradenton, which has employment growth of 0.9% over the past year. When you look elsewhere across the small markets in Florida, what you see is flat employment to some loss. And in fact, we're still cutting jobs in Gainesville, Lakeland, Palm Bay, Pensacola, and Tallahassee.
So, Greg, going forward, do we expect these 3, Sarasota, Bradenton, Fort Myers, Naples, or really Naples, and Fort Walton Beach to remain the top trio going forward?
You know, we can't really do a Florida episode without talking about the 2 steps forward, 1 step back process. These metros tend to do well for a while, then get a little bit of a correction. And in particular, I would say that the Sarasota-Bradenton area is due for that sort of correction, given that it has overperformed for a couple quarters now. But having hedged our bets, let's go to your bigger picture question, and the answer is yes, these are the markets that are best prepared going forward. That simply reflects that the improvement in occupancy and rents has really come because the economies are getting better.
Thank you, Greg. And that wraps us up for Secondary Markets in Florida. Join us next time as we have a special edition of Apartment Market Dynamics, episode 200. So until then, for Greg Willett and for MPF Research, I'm Jay Parsons. Thank you for watching.
Want more? Go deeper with NPF Research's apartment market reports. From a national level, down to individual metros, to specific neighborhoods, NPF Research has been providing unparalleled apartment market intelligence to the multifamily industry for almost 5 decades. Learn more by contacting us at 877-284-4938 or visit www.npfresearch.com and click on Market Reports.